MediCloud, the future of healthcare. What is MediCloud? MediCloud is a doctor-patient interaction platform connecting hospitals, researchers, doctors, and patients together. Here's an overview of the MediCloud Android app. Now we'll be looking at the MediCloud Android application. Here's the app. Once we click on the app, we're welcome to the login screen for our MediCloud platform. So initially, we have to create a patient account for first-time users. Let's say I'm a first-time user. When I click the sign up button, I'll be asked to give in my email address. So I'll just put in abir123 at gmail.com. That's my email address. And then I'll be asked to put in a new password. So I'll put in a password 123 and continue. Then I'll be greeted with another page that'll ask me to enter detailed information about the patient. For example, my name, Abir Rahman, then my date of birth, which is 01/10/1995, and then my blood group, and then whether I'm a male or a female. I'm a male, 01711130557, my phone number, and where I live. I'll put in Gulshan. And when I click next, my account will be created. Connect to the cloud, and my account ID is number 15. Since this is a prototype, we just put that as a toast, but in the real application, there will be a much nicer page. So now let's log into my account. So abir123 at gmail.com, and my password was 123. So now when I log in, I'll be greeted with my information page where I will have my picture, my name, my date of birth, my gender, my blood group, and my detailed address and my phone number. On this particular prototype, we have 3 working buttons here: the Get Doctor, Emergency, and Appointments. First, let me start with the emergency button. When I click the emergency button, you'll be taken to your number dial. In the actual app, you'll be directly dialing to a specific number. So the emergency app basically, the emergency button will basically let you call fixed numbers that you've set. For example, you could set the numbers of your daughters or your father, mother, or anyone who is of importance to you, so that they will be alerted if something is wrong with you. Or you could even set numbers of hospitals and ambulances to call them directly just by the click of one button. Next, let's get a doctor. I'm sick and I want to get a doctor. So when I click doctor, I'm greeted with the list of doctors we have in our database. So let's say I want to go to a gynecologist, and Sadman Mahmood, I've heard, is a very good gynecologist. So let's select him. So when I select his page, so Sadman Mahmood is the number 2 doctor on our database, and he's a gynecologist, and his unique ID is this 168524679. So I could either call the doctor or get an appointment, and I don't think in real life there will be a call doctor option, but this will be most probably be call your hospital option or call to get an appointment. But we have an automatic appointment system. So when I click get appoint, I'll be greeted with a calendar. I can select my date. For example, I want to go on Christmas Day, and I select 25. Okay, and appointment set for 25th with doc number 2 at slot 1. So Sadman Mahmood's first slot was empty, and I was automatically assigned to it. So now when we go back, when we click the appointments option, see, I have Sadman Mahmood on my appointments. I have to go to Sadman Mahmood at 11 a.m. on the 25th. Let's say I want to get another appointment for a doctor. Let's say this time I want to go to Sullivan Widom. So once I click Sullivan Widom, I can again click get appointment, and I want to get an appointment maybe on the 25th again. So I got an appointment at slot 2 with Sullivan Widom. Maybe someone already took slot 1. So this automatic appointment system uses the slot mechanism. So now when I go to appointments and I see Sullivan Widom, I have an appointment with Sullivan on the 25th at 12 p.m. Uh, so that is like an hour after Sadman Mahmood. Our system basically automatically decides on the appropriate time for you to take the appointment. And let's say I want to take an appointment with Sadman Mahmood again, get appointment, and on the 25th, on the not on 25th, on the 24th, and I can do that too. Okay, so when I get back to my appointments page, I have all my appointments right here. I again got slot for the first slot for Sadman Mahmood. And this is basically how our prototype works, but in future it'll be much more nicer and our prescriptions and other more features will be added.
So let's talk a bit more about the back-end processes, how do you make the database and how we are operating it. Okay, so we're using a software called XAMPP to operate our database. Basically, it runs Apache and MySQL, by which we are running our database and performing different queries on it. Let's have a look at the MySQL database. There we go. So this is the PHP MyAdmin of XAMPP. Here we can see all of our different tables in the database. We have the accounts table, the appointments table, the doctor info, and the patient info. Let's go to the accounts. So here we see all of the patients and doctors who have accounts with us. Now, there's one way how we differentiate from patients to doctor is that there's a row called is doctor. If the value of that is 0, then we know that it's a patient, and if it's 1, then it's a doctor. For this video's sake, we only have one doctor here, and all of the rest of them are patients. And you also see that from the previously Abir inserted his information, so it's here. Abir123 is password, and his general ID is listed here. If you go to the appointments, if you go to the patient's info, we also see Abir's info here. It's the same PID, the patient ID, his name, his date of birth, blood group, and other information. And as you know, Abir made some appointments, which is also listed here. It's all happening in the PHP MyAdmin. Okay, let's talk a bit more about how we are doing this, how we are connecting the Android with the PHP MyAdmin. Basically, we are using PHP codes to run some queries and operate and insert and delete and do other queries on the database. So here is the PHP code for the login. On the very top, we see there are some variables. This part of the code is basically to connect to the database we have. So this part of the code connects to the PHP MyAdmin database. From line 9, we have declared a variable. This is how we declare variables on PHP $, and then username and user password. We are getting these variables from the Android. That's why you've used a post here. So username and password, we're getting those variables, the value of those variables. Here we are running a query. Basically, we're not running a query. We are declaring a query. Is doctor. We're seeing if it's a doctor, a general ID. We're taking all the information. And here we're actually running the query, MySQLi_query. And after that, basically we see we fetch the array from this, and then we check if it's a doctor or not, and we check the user ID, and then if it's a doctor, we input the doctor's name, address, and other information. Else we just run another query and include it in the patient's table. So depending on this, the information is either inserted on our doctor's info or the patient's info. Okay. So this is the PHP code which we're using to set the appointment. Basically, how we are making the appointment. It's called set_appointment. Like the previous PHP code, the first few lines are to connect the database, connect the Android to the database. Next, we have a few variables, the PID, the DID, and the date, which are posts, of course, because they're being pulled from the Android. And then here we are basically setting the time. So what's happening here is the query is checking if that doctor already has an appointment in that certain date. If the doctor does have an appointment, if the doctor does have an appointment, it will set the time to +1. So we're using an algorithm. Basically, we're just adding plus digits to this, and then on our Android, we're basically breaking it down and then setting up certain times. So 1 actually means 11 a.m., and then if it's 2, it means 12, and then on and on. So the PHP checks if the doctor already has an appointment. If the doctor does, it's gonna add +1 to the time and then set the appointment. If not, it's just gonna use 1 as the time. So we can see here, if there's less than 1, the time variable is 1. Also, if it's also checking if the appointment slot is full. So suppose if the doctor can only check 10 patients a day, and if it's full, it'll also say, sorry, we have no vacancies today. All right, let's get back to the PHP MyAdmin. And here we have a relations diagram for all of our tables. We have the appointments table, we have the doctor info, and we have the patient's info. So we see that the doctor info and the patient info is connected to the appointments using the PID and the DID. We also see there's another table here, which is accounts, which isn't really connected to anything. That's because we aren't really using this particular table for anything else rather than just logging into the Android app. So all this is doing is it's just taking the information, it's just letting us know what the informations we have. But there is a connection, which is the general ID. The general ID, it actually matches the PID or the DID. If it's a match, then basically from here we go to either the doctor's info or the patient's info. Right. So that's basically a rough walkthrough of what's happening behind the app on the database and on the PHP. We'll also have another walkthrough of what's going on the Android.
Previously, we have looked at how our database works. But we might be thinking, how does our database connect to MediCloud, our app? Now that's where the crux of our app lies. The background process. The background process is something that is a class that extends from an Android class called async task. Now, for us to understand what an async task is, we must know that there are two types of threads. There might be more. For us, there are two types of threads in our Android app. One is the UI thread and the other is the async thread. In the UI thread, we might be pressing buttons and UI elements might be drawn here and there. Now, upon pressing a button, for example, getting the appointment list, upon pressing this button, we're supposed to get an appointment list, a list of appointments that the patient has, like this. The appointment list is gonna be populated in this format: doctor name, date, and time. Now, when we press that button, a new background process is created and an async task is assigned. Here the process starts and ends somewhere. It totally depends on the server when it completes, how fast it is and stuff. And it will return something back to the UI and then it will update. Now, in the background process, we have a list of links to our PHP files, which runs the queries in our server. After, since we have the links, and every time we press a button that has needs its very own background process, like the appointments or the get doctor, a new background process is made, and certain parameters are sent. For example, when we press get doctor or get appointment, these parameters are sent. We say get appointment list, or suppose get doctor list, something like that. These parameters are sent. And background process, there's only one function where the background process runs, which is do in background. And over here we have to separate each type of background process via if else. As for appointment list, it's this one, so it's this. The parameters we're sending is number one, the type, which is at the top, and it dictates which way it's gonna go. For appointment list, we also take in the PID. After taking it in, we set up our HTTP URL connection. We use an output stream to send information to our server, mainly our PID right now, and then an input stream takes in the data that the server sends back, echoes back. Then the server might echo back a JSON file or simply just a single string. For the appointment list, we are getting back a JSON file. A JSON is basically an array. We are getting back an array, so we need JSON. How are we decrypting the JSON file? First off, we are getting the JSON array, then we're taking out the JSON objects. It sort of goes like this. We are getting back a JSON array like this, then we are getting back objects like so, like doc1, doc2. These are objects, JSON objects, and this is the entire array. Now, first off, we get the array, and each loop we are getting back that JSON object from that array. Afterwards, we close the connection and we return the array that we got. Upon returning, the background process simply, after finishing this do in background method, we return to on post execute. On post execute is the same. We know what the type is, and we have separated the type of functions via these if else statements. For get appointment list, we are simply calling a delegate dot bg process done, and inside bg process done we are sending result. Delegate is just an interface which connects the background process and the other UI thread, because we don't really know when this process is gonna finish, so we have to use an interface and a delegate to update the information that we're sending back. For appointment list, upon calling bg process done, it just populates the list with the array, and dialogues are created if you don't have any appointments. That is all.
So this part of the video demonstrates the dashboard that we have created in order to access the databases from our website, so that it's easier for us to see the amounts of, or the numbers of doctors we have added and the amounts of appointments we have in a day. It is more visibly presentable, and it's easier for, since we have 4 different admins, so it is easier to have a dashboard, and so that we can overview and overlook the things and the changes that are being made to our main database table. So basically we have the database tables here, and as more data are added, it becomes clumsy and it looks ugly. So basically that is one of the main reason we thought of having a dashboard as to connect to the backend. So after logging in, will be taken directly to the dashboard main page, which gives us an overview of the number of doctors and the number of appointments we have currently in our database. So at the time of this video being made, we had only 2 doctors and 7 appointments. So basically, the now recently added doctors are displayed over here, and since we also want to have access to all the doctors we have in our database, but currently it's only 2, sadly. So we all have created this page separately, so that as more and more doctors are added, we still want to view all of the doctors list. So things will become easier if we have a separate page for the doctors, and this is for the appointments, so that we can also view the number of appointments being made through our application. So basically, this dashboard was created in order to make things easier for us to look over the things like doctors and appointments. We haven't made any for the patients yet. We just wanted to keep things simple, and we have made this just for the doctors and appointments. Hopefully in the future, implications we will add for the patients as well, but since we are adding the doctors manually, we needed to have a dashboard and a dashboard to connect to our backend, so that we can see the changes that are being made. Basically, we have used Bootstrap's layout for making this web page, and to access our database tables at the PHP MyAdmin localhost, we have implemented the query and the MySQL query to access the data. So basically, that's it. That's it for the dashboard part of the. That's it for the dashboard part of our demo.